Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. This is one of our digital marketing series on SEO, episode number 2. We're going to be talking with Bobby with Signa Media, Signa Marketing, excuse me, with Signa Marketing, and we're going to be talking today about the on-site SEO. So, Bobby, thanks for being with us again. We appreciate your helping us with this SEO, unraveling it for us, telling us where we need to put our attention and, why we need to worry about certain issues.
Oh, of course. No, happy to do so. Yeah, SEO is one of my favorite subjects, and it's a maze. It's a puzzle that can always be put together. So excited to dive into the on-site aspect of it today.
Yeah, and if you this is the first episode you're listening to, you may want to go back 1 week. We posted episode 1 where we kind of just went over the generals of SEO, who it's for, why we should care about it, and the building blocks. And I think we're going to pick up there with our keyword. The place to start is let's look at the keywords to see what people are actually searching for.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. So kind of where we left off exactly is keyword research and how to conduct it. So again, for context, when we start to dive into SEO, keyword research really dictates and drives the strategy from there. And it really is a domino effect from there. So we start with keyword research to understand what exactly is our end user searching for in relation to our product or service. And we start to ask ourselves, okay, well, if we have an existing site, we ask ourselves, does any of our current content on our site even meet those key phrases or answer those questions? And you start to try to make sure that you're matching everything driven based off of the user, of what they're searching for. And so a really good free tool that everyone can use is the Google Keyword Planner in any Google Ads account. And that tool is going to give you at least an idea of the keywords. Like after you've identified certain keywords that you want to go after, you can vet them. You can see, okay, are people actually searching for these keywords? Is there search volume behind it? And with that tool, it'll also give you an estimated average cost per click. And typically, keywords that have a high cost per click, meaning that they're pretty competitive, are indications that they're actually very valuable keywords, that there's some buying intent behind them, because advertisers are not going to waste money on keywords that don't have buying intent usually behind them.
Right.
And so using a free tool like that can definitely start to at least give you a foundation from a keyword research standpoint of what type of content you should have on your website, what pages should exist on your website, et cetera. If you want to take your keyword research up a notch, you can use a paid tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs. Those are great tools for conducting even deeper keyword research. But that's where you want to start, is your keyword research, and that's going to drive the rest of your SEO strategy from an on-site perspective.
Yeah, and I'm very much a novice at this, so I will pose this as a question to you. So sometimes when we look up keywords, we'll actually see that there may be a phrase that's associated with that. So I guess part of looking that up is that maybe there's 2 or 3 words we could actually string together to make that a searchable, or whatever our title or whatever our content, even more searchable with more words strung in there. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. It's almost, I always kind of preach that we want to get away from the idea of just optimizing one page for one keyword or one key phrase. It's really a theme that you're trying to optimize for. And so you'll try to find that top level key phrase that has the most search volume. But to what you mentioned right now, there's going to be a ton of other keyword variations that mean the same thing or 90% closely related to that main keyword that maybe have lower search volume, but you want to make sure that those are included and counted for within your on-site SEO strategy. So absolutely.
Yeah, and depending upon the industry too, we may have very specific words that we use within an industry that if the consumer is not familiar with those technical terms, they may be searching using some combination of different words. And that's one thing I've noticed about like the SEMrush. I've used that prior, in that if you put a broad category in, sometimes you may be surprised at the different words that come up for that category.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, SEMrush has a neat tool within the keyword magic tool for that, because you'll find even a couple columns. One column is questions that are related to the subject matter. And it's great because if you're trying to find blog content to write for,
Exactly.
well, it's giving it to you right there, what
Yep.
people are asking, the search engine.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the number on the right, the number of searches, is there a good, I realize that each phrase that we put into search, it may have its own grouping, but I was looking at one the other day that had like the top one had 10,000, but then we got down into the hundreds. Is there a line that where we want to cut off, or as long as it's getting some in the hundreds of search traffic, is that good?
Yeah, so there's a couple factors that come into play because it depends where you're currently at in your SEO journey.
Okay.
And so, for example, if you have a really high authority website, like super high, like say even like Forbes or something like that, for them, they have so much authority that they know they'll go for the most likely the key phrases for a term that has the most search volume, in the sense that because they have so much authority that they know that they can most likely rank for it.
Right.
A small business that tries to go for an insanely competitive keyword that has 100,000, searches per month. The reality is that they're most likely not going to rank for it.
Okay.
So they got to start to drill down and find keywords that are more in their tier of authority.
Okay.
They're realistically going to rank for. And that's also talking from a national SEO perspective. When it comes to local SEO, that search volume is definitely going to be lower depending on the service that you're offering and stuff like that too. So, if you're a service-based business in a local area, maybe the search volume for a keyword or key phrase is, maybe a few thousand per month, or maybe even just 800 per month or something like that.
Okay.
So there's going to be variables like that when it comes to that geographic location, because a search volume for a specific service in LA compared to a small city in Nebraska or something like that, that search volume is going to be different within those two areas.
Okay, cool. So that kind of leads us into the next topic, is the URL structure, and you've talked a little bit about domain authority. So what does all that mean for us?
Yeah, so say for example you complete all your keyword research and you've identified, and let me back up one second too, is say for example you're a small business and it's a service-based business and you have 3 services. So each of those services, you're going to conduct keyword research for each service to understand, what are people actually searching on a search engine related to service number 1, and then we'll do that for service number 2 and then number 3. So that process will then lead into the URL structure of a website, because then you're starting to look at how to organize a website. So first it would start with your home page, and then after that you'll have your 3 service pages, and then a contact page most likely, and then probably a blog so that you can work on top funnel stuff there. But that's where you start to look at the architecture of a website. And it is it's all about organizing information. That's how these search engines, they're really looking at how is information organized, and the better that we organize that information to make sense to anyone, then the better for a search engine crawler and also thus a user.
Okay.
So that's the output of getting a sitemap. And so once you look, so that's the result and the deliverable from doing that exercise, is really you're looking to get to a sitemap of what are the pages that need to exist on my website, and then how are they organized, which pages are sub pages of other pages, and just going through that organization like that.
Okay.
Once you get to that point, then you're like, okay, great, I have my sitemap. I know the type of site that I need to build or how to restructure my current website. Then from there, you want to make sure that each page really has honed in terms of the exact keyword topic that it's going to be optimized for. And so once you get to that point, then everything's a domino effect because each page has a purpose.
Okay.
And so, for example, with the service number 1, you'll say, okay, cool, I know what the keyword for this page is. And now I can write my title tag and my meta description to carry that keyword strategy within those 2 items there. So that's kind of like the process there, to at least starting the title tag and even the meta description process.
Okay, awesome. So content, I'm a firm believer in content marketing. I mean, I think that's how we differentiate ourselves from other people, is putting out thoughtful content, being helpful, not being afraid we're not giving away the secret sauce. Usually when we give away some good details, we're actually explaining to the consumer how it may be a lot more difficult for them to do this themselves than reaching out and hiring an expert. So let's talk a little bit about, the content.
For sure, absolutely. And even just to string these two items together, from title tag, meta to content, I also did want to mention that. So I touched on having your keyword research or your keyword category integrate into your title tag. You want it in your meta description, not because it actually increases rankings or anything like that. Your meta description is actually all focused on increasing your click-through rate. So you just want to make sure that it's supportive of the headline, because how we mentioned earlier is that, there's only 10 positions on Google, and so everyone's fighting for it. So you want to make sure that your listing sticks out. But the cool thing about adding your keyword within the meta description is that if people are searching it, it's actually going to be bolded. And,
Yes.
and that's, and just like those little items are things that can help boost your click-through rate. So then from there, it does lead us into the page content, because this is honestly like a high level, like easy ratio just for people to use, but it's pretty safe to at least have that keyword category or keyword phrase appear at least every 150 words throughout a piece of content, just naturally. It's not something, plus or minus. It's not, be all, it's not the holy grail or anything like that, but that's a good rule of thumb, is about every 150 words, this keyword or key phrase is going to appear naturally within the content itself.
Okay.
From there, you also want to make sure that your content is well organized. And what that means is, making sure that the end user, when they're going through the content, they understand what's a heading and they're reading. That makes an introduction. Then it goes into some major points, some sections. And so that's where you would use your H2s. And then maybe an H2 topic has to be broken into H3s to really get more, in the details of that subject. So it's all about just organizing content that makes it really easy for the end user to consume and understand where they're at in their journey of consuming this article or this piece of content. So
yeah, and I want to back up for just a minute to the meta descriptions, because we were talking about time on the page, and we want people to stay on your site longer. So it's important not only to have one, but if you change your page or tweak it, make sure that your meta descriptions keep up, because the worst thing you can do is say, I'm going to tell you about, how to fix your garage door, how to buy one. You click on it and it's something totally different. People will leave your page immediately because they think it's, there's something wrong with this. I'm going to go to somebody else. So it's just a good idea, because that's kind of if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of like your, your teaser, your advertiser, like, this is what we're going to talk about if you click on this link here.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, say Google rewards you with rankings and traffic, and how we mentioned, I mean, if they don't see that historical behavior of people landing and staying on the site of that page stuff, it's going to affect your rankings at some point too. It's what you mentioned. It's highly important to stay relevant with all those items.
So the other thing, not to belabor the page content either, is simple, but as a non-writer, one thing I was never used to doing is putting those the titles in. And so what they ask you to do, I think in some writing platforms, it's about every 150, 200, maybe 300 words, they want you to break it up, have a new title, and then you can use that, either the H2, it's the size of it, or the H4, it's a little bit smaller, but you use those in order to kind of break up the page where readers can, I guess it's a sitemap for the content. Actually, people can look at those titles and see kind of where we're going with this, or skip around. So it's a good thing to add. And if you're like me, if you're a non-writer, it's very important. I never really saw the need for it, but especially the more we talk about SEO, the more important that they really are.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, you'll even find really, really long pieces of content that are just jam-packed with a lot of good information, and you'll find them online as like guides, or like, they're not even a blog article. Maybe they're like 4,000 or 5,000 words.
Right.
But you'll find that a lot of them, even at the top for large pieces of content, they'll be very organized with headings, but they'll even have a table of contents at the very top that are anchor linked and stuff like that. And Google loves that too, because I mean, now in search, people have probably noticed that when they have a question, they'll type into Google, and Google's feeding answers even from aspects that are in the middle of a page. And when you click on it, it'll actually take you straight to the middle of that page.
Yeah.
And so it's getting insanely dynamic, which is awesome for the end user.
Right.
But it's important that from us, as business owners or publishers, that we're taking all those items into account so that we can maximize the opportunity for optimization.
Yeah, and it's funny you mention that, because this week I've noticed that, it used to every now and then you would, if you did a search for how to or something, you might get a little paragraph that opened up at the top. But now I've noticed that as you click down even through the page, it starts opening up and it'll give you a block of text from that article to check out before you even click. So.
Oh yeah. It's definitely been nice for me with any questions I have. It just takes me straight to it. It'll be sometimes highlighted in yellow. I'm like, dude, this is awesome.
Right. All right. So, so internal linking, there's some other things that, even though we've got a great article written, we've broken it up with some subtitles, subtopics. So now let's talk about internal linking, and then also pictures and images. I think that's also very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So one aspect of optimizing content is definitely internal linking, and internal linking is related to having internal links that point to other pages within your website. So it's not taking a person out or anything like that. And I'll touch on outbound links, but right now it's just for internal links.
Yeah.
What you're always asking yourself is, what's beneficial for the user experience. Always just use that as your anchor, because that's what a search engine is looking for. And so, say for example, you have a page or a blog post, and you're going through the content, and when you find a mention that ties into another aspect of your site or anything like that, those are opportunities to create an internal link to feed to point that user in that direction if they need it. They have a question about, whatever they read that they can get answered.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're just looking for from a user experience standpoint, especially if they have a paragraph and you mention some term that maybe doesn't make sense to them, but you have another piece of content that answers that.
Yeah.
You would internalize that.
Yeah.
So
one thing I've just done on my personal website, where I talk a little bit about employee retention, is, so what I did is I've got like 10 or 12 steps that we need to walk through. With each one has their own page with its own content, but what I've done is at the bottom I put the link to that next page, so it makes it easier for them to go from number 1 to number 2 without having to go back up to the top and get back into the menu again.
Yes. Yeah, that exactly. There's also this is kind of gets more heavier into the technical aspect, but I'll touch on it a little bit. Is how backlink authority juice is being funneled into the site. So when, say for example, you have a high authority website with a backlink to one of your pages, and then that page should have internal links that are natural, that are beneficial to the user, that those internal links are actually going to capture some of that authority juice, and it's going to get dispersed. And so imagine just this juice of authority getting dispersed into the site as it makes its way through, and it gets diluted. As you get pages deeper and deeper, it gets diluted in a sense. But that's something that's also why internal linking is so important, because though you have a backlink that's pointed to page A, but if B and C are linked to it internally, then they'll benefit some juice too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so let's talk about images right quick. It's a must-have nowadays. We probably really shouldn't just post anything that's strictly text. We need to find some kind of an image. And again, my opinion, stock images are good and they have their moment and their place. But if we could take a real live image of us or our workplace or our process or our vehicles or whatever, to me, it always adds that connection from somebody that may have just hit the site trying to figure out, who is Bobby really?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I always start with authentic photos.
Yeah.
And then, if you're on a budget pinch or just resources or time, then you can default to using a relevant stock photo for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what that's a great point right there. When it comes to optimizing the image on a page, There's a few factors you want to look at. Of course, size. How big is this image? Is it going to take forever to load? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure that it's compressed, but without losing quality, and ensure that it's going to load fast. If you have a web development team, do inquire about different formats that image can be rendered in, because you can have one image but different copies of it depending on what device it's going to be rendered on.
Oh, okay.
And that way you can optimize for mobile, so that if the server dictates, oh, okay, this call is coming from a mobile user, then it's going to use the mobile version of the image so that it's even faster and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I'm kind of just keeping it super high level on that technical aspect. But if you have a development team, definitely inquire about the different formats of one single image, so you can even optimize for platforms that way.
Yeah.
The other items is going to be alt text and title text. And with those, that's the opportunity to keyword enrich the image itself, to basically describe what's occurring and what that image is related to. And that is important, that image is related to the keyword subject matter of the actual page as a whole. Yeah. So that's important as well. But visual search from Google's perspective is really important. And so that's why making sure that all your images are properly optimized can go a long way.
Yeah. Okay, great. Which kind of leads into the technical portion. Site speed. It used to, there was a place you could go to kind of run some tests, but you do get dinged where if your page doesn't load up fast enough, which has to do with the images and some other things. But talk about that for just a minute.
Yes. Yeah. So more and more technical SEO is incredibly important. It's always been really important, but now from a site speed perspective, I mean, it is Google's expectations from us are very high. We want to make sure that we're getting as close to meeting those as possible. But that entails, from a technicality standpoint, making sure that our sites are loading at lightning speeds. Honestly, the faster, the better. And it does get into the technical side of things of how sites are coded, what platforms to use, stuff like that. But there's always a way to make sure that your site is super, super fast. And this also kind of touches into what we described right now with images, of even looking at, how to make sure that you're taking advantage of any optimization efforts with, providing images for specific platforms or devices, in that sense, so that you're not loading this huge image on a mobile device. Right. You can send a different version of it that's smaller and more compressed. And then also making sure that all your accessibility issues are always resolved. Accessibility is a big aspect, and it's also why image, alt text, and title text are important too, because it's for if so that people that can understand contextually what it's about, if the image is not rendering and stuff like that too. So accessibility goes a long way too, and that's something that Google does look for. If your site is having issues with accessibility in that sense, your pages will get penalized in some way.
And nowadays, I think if you're using WordPress or something very simple, I think all of them now are optimized for PC and for cell phone. But I would say that, if you still have a site that might have been built, that hard coded back in the day, that's something that you definitely need to check out, because the sites that were designed for a PC, they just do not load correctly onto a phone, and that can be a big thing. And the other part of that is if you need to check out. It's a little easier on, when I've run some some YouTube ads where you can go and see, but you'd be surprised, especially on the YouTube side, that maybe 75% of the traffic nowadays is, 75-80% comes from a cell phone. So most everybody, except for some of us old timers that still get on a computer because we need to have a big screen to see what's on there. but most people are, doing everything off of their cell phones nowadays.
Oh yeah. No, there's a lot of industries that mobile devices just makes up more than half of the traffic for a site. There are definitely certain industries that it's still the reverse. I would say even businesses that are in really large business, maybe like really large engineering firms or like stuff like that, you'll see that desktop still takes over in terms of traffic. But as if you're on especially on a B2C business to consumer market, hands down, mobile phone.
Yeah, and we need to wrap this up. I know one more point though is it's good to look at your audience to see where that's coming from, because one time on doing a YouTube ad, I made a mistake, and for some reason I had checked Europe as my target market, and it ran for a few days, and I started noticing, like, wow, all this traffic is coming from TVs, and so I guess in Europe they must use a lot more TVs for surfing the internet than what we do. But just it's a little bitty thing like that whoever that audience is, wherever they reside, there may be those little differences that we need to sure pick up on.
Oh yes, no, that hands down.
Yeah. All right, Bobby. Well, thanks a lot. Hey, tell everybody how they can reach out and get a hold of you.
Absolutely. So if you have any additional questions, or you have a specific situation, you're like, man, I wish I could just get the answer for this, feel free to send it my way. I have a cool show called Blueprint that we answer questions on the fly on our YouTube show. So if you have a question, feel free to find us at Signa Marketing is our handle on all social media. So you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or even LinkedIn. And even if it's a comment or a direct message, we're always scraping those questions and making sure we answer them on the next episode.
Okay, great. So y'all tune in. We'll go back next week. Go back to last week, and you can look at the introduction to SEO, and then stay tuned. Next week, we're going to be talking about offsite SEO. So until next time, Bobby, thanks again for your time. Of course, y'all can find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com, and we're on all the major social media platforms, as well as all the podcast platforms. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your business.